the first question, as experts on international relations, culture, and having been in Busan for a very long time and very familiar with Asia, what is Busan's status or what is Busan's position in the international community?
Unfortunately, I think if we're talking about tourism, I think most foreigners probably don't know which country Busan is in. So I think it's important to recognize that fact. And when it comes to tourist marketing in particular, I mean, most of the time when you would like to have a city really recognized and associated with some kind of tourist activity, you have to have a landmark, right? So Paris is the Eiffel Tower, Rome's got the Colosseum. So in that sense, Busan also is a little bit lacking in that sense because it doesn't have anything strongly cultural that's really old that people can point to and say, oh, you can only see that in Busan. So I think in terms of that kind of tourist outlook, I do think Busan often gets lost in the wash. And if you also look at how the city of Busan has spent its money in terms of how it's been developing tourism, most of the money until very recently was for domestic tourism, resort style, fancy hotels, things like this. So I think this is a new challenge for them to try to open it up more internationally.
Professor O'Malley, I'll ask the same question to you. What do you think is Busan's status for the international community?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with what Justin had to say as far as the common man, the tourist is concerned. Busan, of course, has one of the world's top shipping facilities. The port of Busan does a lot of business, and if you're an import-exporter somewhere in the world, then you know Busan exists if you do any business in Asia. As far as intergovernmental organizations go as well, Busan is well known. I mean, it's hosted APEC in 2005, a UN high-level forum in 2011 on aid effectiveness, which brought in, I think, 160 countries plus aid organizations. And it's hosted 2 ASEAN summits in 2014 and 2019. So as far as having the governance capacity and the experience of hosting a major event, Busan has done it. They haven't done something for, a World Expo is 6 months long, but Busan has the capacity to pull it together. And it does have name recognition as far as the right people are concerned to pull this off. In global business and in the IGO community. But yeah, I agree with Justin. I think one of the issues, one of the things the World Expo is geared towards is bringing in international tourists. And so the question is, once the expo is over, will you still be able to draw on the expo to get a return on your investment, bring in more international tourists, and keep bringing in domestic tourism, which in Busan, having Haeundae Beach is already one of the top tourist destinations for Koreans, so there's probably not much growth there.
What do you think a country has to do or a city has to do in order to prepare to host these mega events, to host this expo?
Well, the first thing, I mean, you have to look at it from 2 perspectives, really. The first is sort of a policy-making perspective. What is the goal? And is the goal actually achievable? So that's a really important question because that's going to determine your return on investment long term. And the other is the material terms, right? There are basically 3 dominating factors when it comes to something like the World Expo. The budget, can you afford it? To give a little perspective there, Paris pulled out of the bidding on the 2025 Expo because they couldn't afford it. The second thing is number of hotel rooms. Dubai right now is said to be adding an extra 35,000 hotel rooms just to get the expo to where it should be. And then the other is transportation infrastructure. And Justin had mentioned sort of policymakers have been focusing on domestic tourism. That's a great point because Busan has the transportation infrastructure. It can probably borrow the money. Its fiscal soundness is pretty good. But as far as hotel rooms go, we've got a lot of low-end hotels, love hotels, and then we have a whole lot of high-end hotels, but we're really lacking mid-tier hotels that are very affordable for family travel and other kind of tourists that aren't particularly wealthy. And so that was a complaint in Yosu in 2012, and it was a complaint during the Formula One that they tried to hold in Jeollanam-do, and it could be a concern for Busan when the 2030 Expo rolls around.
But no, I absolutely take your point, and that's the thing, transportation obviously a huge point as well, and with the Gado Airport, this is underway, and how they're going to be able to make the link from the airport into the city to make it a smooth transition to get in and out. And that's also going to be interesting to see. So yeah, great points. I'm going to ask the same question to you, Professor.
Yeah, so I agree with Professor O'Malley that the transportation aspect probably isn't going to be as big of a problem because the central government's probably going to back that. And as you mentioned, it looks like there's a new airport in the works, and most of the public transportation in Busan, I mean, it's congested, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I also agree that the accommodation is a bit of an issue, and then also the peripherals, as we kind of mentioned a little earlier. People who visit an expo, oftentimes they want to see other things too. They're usually not just here for the expo. And also, just to throw some numbers out, I mean, the numbers that you're looking at for Milan in 2015, they received 21.5 million visitors. So it's really a lot of visitors that you have to be able to accommodate. And it's also worth mentioning that most of those visitors are actually domestic. So even in Milan, only about 25% of those were foreign visitors. And this is Milan, right? I mean, this is where people go all the time. So I do think that if you can, getting foreign tourists is good, and obviously that brings a lot more money in than a domestic tourist. But one of the things that's really important, especially if you're one of these mega-sized events that's not the Olympics and not the World Cup, you really do want to do it in a country that has a large population that's willing to spend and willing to visit, because that's actually the primary driver that makes it worthwhile.
And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your opinions, your views. It's been very helpful, and I'm sure our viewers also and listeners have been very, very interested in what you've had to say. I certainly have been. Thank you so much. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.